good evening. We're really glad to have a Christian Bravo, W4ALF, with us tonight. He's written several articles, two which I've noticed in QST, one on, I think it was bicycling and doing ham radio. I saw a video that you had posted on your webpage about walking around with a whole ham station on your back. So all kinds of interesting ways of communicating. The article, though, that caught my attention was titled Tips for Earning Nine-Band DXCC. And it's of interest to all of us. Not everyone has, 40 acres of land or multiple towers and tons of antennas, but that doesn't prevent one from having just a fantastic result on DXCC. And you certainly see that from the report that Lloyd gave us just a few minutes ago about some of our members' contacts in the recent couple of months. But Chris is going to talk to us about how he's put his station together, the techniques he uses to achieve the awards that he has, and lessons for all of us. So with that, Chris, please take it over.
Sure. Okay, let me share my screen here. Let me know if you guys can see that. It's the thumbs up.
Looks good.
All right. Let's maximize that. Move that a little bit out of the way. My call sign is W4ALF. And I'm going to talk a little bit about work in DX and specifically kind of my road to going towards 9-band DXCC. I currently have 8-band DXCC, and my band that's missing is 12 meters. So I have about 62 confirmed on that one. And so working towards 9-band. From a small lot, I have a quarter acre and a decent radio, but compromised on the antenna side. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, things that I learned, tools that I've used, and hopefully there's something in there that we can learn from. And I'm going to open it up towards the end for questions, and also for you guys to kind of chime in on things. It sounds like we have a lot of DXers here, so it's going to be fun to be able to kind of pick up what everyone else is doing for different aspects of making the DX contact. A little bit about me. I'm a late starter to the hobby. My uncle was a amateur radio operator, and I got interested in the hobby when I was a teenager, but never really circled back to it till I was older, in my 40s. So got licensed in 2016, and just been kind of semi-obsessed with the hobby since then. I'm interested in a lot of different aspects of the hobby, not just HF and DX. I do activities like SOTA, POTA, QRP is a great interest of mine, and try different modes of operating. SOTA was one of them, and having attended conventions like Dayton Hamvention, which I guess is now in Xenia, which is actually not far from me. saw folks doing different types of operating. Saw people with radios on their backs and operating. And so that got me interested in pedestrian mobile and kind of creating my own setup with pedestrian mobile, which then led me to do something with bikes because I'm a biker. So setting up a bike mobile type of setup. And currently, a lot of my time is being spent with satellites. I'm spending a lot of time operating satellites, which also allows me to do DX. I have 28 confirmed, I think, DX, and over something like 362 grids, which is the big deal in satellite world. I'm also a CW Ops member and instructor, so I'm very, very big into CW operating, and instructed with CW Ops for about a couple of years. I recently took a break to focus on a couple other things. SKCC Senator. SKCC is a straight key century club. So Senator's a level status there with them after contenting, 600 members or whatever. So also CW. Obviously, I'm a DX chaser and I'm an award chaser. So I'm always looking to get that paper to hang. And always looking for new DX awards, and I'll talk about that in a second. And I like writing and generally promoting the hobby, not just DX, but the hobby in general. So I'm always trying to find ways to be able to promote the hobby. Now, regarding the awards that I have and the type of things I've been kind of chasing after, I mentioned I have 8-band DXCC. 12 meters is the one that's kind of hanging for 9-band still, and then we'll go from there. We'll see what we do after that. But I have different endorsements, mixed modes, QRP, digital, CW, some other awards, worked all continent on 6 bands, WIPX 1000, worked all zones, worked all Europe, which Dark sponsors, the German radio, the Deutsche Amateur Radio Club, worked all Pacific. So that's getting 30 countries from the Pacific. And the New Zealand Radio and Telegraphy Club does that award. The Canada Award, so getting all the provinces on a particular band. All Japan districts, the ARRL, Japan's radio league, sponsors that one. So Japan's separated in 10 different districts. And so 0 through 9. So achieving all those districts, you're able to get an award. One of many that they have. I have the All Africa Award. So that's getting African DX, non-island, in 6 of the districts within South Africa. And the South African Radio League sponsors that one. And things that you may find on QRZ and those types of awards. Like I mentioned, I'm heavy into satellite right now. So satellite's been kind of my focus in the last about year and a half. I'm going to talk a little bit about my antenna situation. Given that I have a small 1/4 acre lot, there's woods in the back. There's not a lot of green, not a ton of green. I don't have any antennas in the front yard. So I ended up putting up a ground mounted vertical, a Hustler 5 BTV. It was my first antenna and is still my main antenna and my only low band antenna, really. I've tried others. The 5B TV I always seem to come back to. It can do most bands. The Hustler you can put add-ons to it, and it goes up to 80 meters. And through another ham that had a similar situation and was working on 160 meters DXCC, brought me onto the idea of putting a wire into the 80-meter resonator on the top of the Hustler and, you know, bringing it out to a tree horizontally in a inverted L fashion to be able to achieve some sliver of resonance on 160 meters. And I was extremely skeptical because at the time I was racking my brain trying to figure out how I'm going to squeeze 160 meter antennas to achieve 160 meter DXCC. And I tried a couple inverted dipole type of scenario wire antennas at my dad's house, who lives close by. It was still running into being able to get that antenna high enough and achieve a good low takeoff angle for DX, because that's specifically what I was trying to achieve. So after talking with this ham that did this setup, he had achieved a 160 meter DXCC. He was also in the Midwest, and worked all states, 160 meters in a short amount of time. And it really got me thinking. So I got all the information I could from him, and did it myself, and was amazed at what I was able to accomplish with the wire off of such a small loaded antenna. The vertical does have about 32 radials. They're all about 20 feet, radiating out from the center on a grid plate manufactured by DX Engineering. You know, obviously verts are great for low takeoff angle. I'm in a small lot, and it was really awkward to stretch out the low band antennas and to get them high enough and for the antenna to reach from one end to my other lot. A lot of the low band antennas would have almost exceeded my lot lines. So I had to stay within 10 feet surrounding 5 to 10 feet on either side of my lot as well. So things couldn't extend out either. So I had to try to work with, you know, within certain parameters. And the vertical worked really well for me. It's also within trees. I heard somebody talking about a receive antenna within trees. So this is hidden within trees, and I'll show a picture of that later. And it's also painted greenish camo color, Krylon, which does not contain any, this particular color doesn't contain any active metallic ingredients that would potentially interact with the antenna. As I painted it, I did tape off any connections between sections and things of that nature. So I tried to keep that to a minimum to allow good connections in between any connectors that needed to be able to have good connectivity. There is a choke at the base of the antenna. There's an RF choke. There's also an RF choke inside. My shack has a ground plane inside the shack, and several ground rods and grounding throughout my system. You know, I've never had the shack without a lot of grounding. It was kind of by design in the beginning. So it's hard to say, you know, what it would have been like one way or the other. I just know that I have it. And so my current situation, my situation actually from the beginning was always with that type of scenario. Now, you know, some of the drawbacks that with the vertical, you know, noise. So definitely low bands can be quite noisy. I tried to help or alleviate that issue by my choice of modes. So CW, FT8, a lot of times helped with having to beat through the noise, whether it's, you know, noisy 160 meter or trying to eke out a really weak signal in 20 meters. I also did set up a receive antenna, a mag loop antenna, which I found reduced the noise floor about 2S units, and but wasn't great for DX. It was a fairly small mag loop off my deck. So I've don't have experience having set up maybe a pennant or a flag or something, or an array, receive array. I just don't have the lot, but this did not keep me from achieving my goals and getting a lot of DX on low bands. This, like I said, this is my only low band antenna, and is what I use to work 8-band DXCC. So I would consider this, kind of a compromise situation, especially when you see larger stations and the type of antennas, that they have, especially on the low bands and with receive. I think is, definitely something that you see in the bigger stations. I used to have a Chris-Craft mini beam, an MA5B, and that was on a 4.5-foot tower on a rotator. So it probably put it at about 33 feet, so not very high. And again, 4.5 foot off my roof, but worked excellent. This is a very small beam. And had traps and cap hats. So even though it was, loaded, it was end loaded per se, and had cap hats. So it was a pretty good design for compromised small beam. And it worked really well for me, for HF. Most of the time I could hear them on my vertical though. But the directivity and that little extra gain sometimes made a difference, on particular extremely weak signal context. It gave me that extra oomph on the antenna side that definitely helped out. Again, I probably could have done without it, but it was definitely nice. And this allowed me the directivity and gain, but in a very small footprint. And I'll show a picture of that later as well, so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about if you're not already familiar with the antenna. I did try other antennas, and that was part of my strategy all along, was to try just different type of antennas. A lot of times I'd go over to my father's house, who doesn't live far away and has more land, to stretch out some antennas, and I would test out different wire antennas. And I work portable a lot, so anytime I work portable, I'm using very simple wire antennas with QRP, with like a Elecraft KX2, and I've worked plenty of DX, with 5 watts as well. My vertical that I was explaining, this is you can barely see the antenna in between the trees. One's more during very early spring, end of winter, early spring, and the other's during the summer. But you can see that it's surrounded by foliage. Some of you might have read articles out there regarding interaction of trees with antennas, and that all I can tell you is I've had this set up the whole time, and it never stopped me from making, breaking through pileups and achieving what I've achieved. So I always say, like, always give it a try. You're like, well, I don't know if it's going to work here, it's going to work there. The best thing is to give it a try. Give it a shot and see how it performs. Most antennas are compromised, so it's always best to experiment, and I was always experimenting with different antennas. I mentioned the 160 meter setup. So in this antenna, there's an 80 meter resonator at the top with a whip. Whip's probably a couple of foot long. So I would remove that whip and place about a 20-foot wire, which I then hung to the nearest tree in an inverted L fashion. This gave me about 80 to 100 kilohertz of bandwidth, which I centered around FT8, I believe. So it gave me digital mode and CW, surrounding FT8, in the subband. And I was able to achieve 160 meter DXCC. over a couple seasons, 160-meter seasons. I was able to achieve that. And the modes for that were basically CW and FT8 were the two modes that I achieved that with. At the time I had the MA5B, this is the footprint. This is what it looked like on my roof. So it did not extend over my roof. And most of the time, my neighbors thought it was a giant TV antenna. So most people would ask me, you must really hate cable, or, what station, how far, what state do you get stations from, your TV, this, that, and the other. Most of the time I played along because I really didn't want to get into lengthy discussions as to, what it is and why I do it and what's the motivation, and the whole 9 yards. My experience has been that it a lot of times it didn't really click, what it is I was doing. I've explained it to one of my neighbors before, and he still believes it's a broadcast station antenna. So a lot of times, unless they show some genuine interest, or maybe they know some ham radio operators, so they have genuine curiosity, I may go into explaining a little bit about what it is. But for the most part, most people don't ask, and sometimes don't even notice. I've had people drive up and I said, did you notice the antenna? And they're like, what antenna? And then they look and they're like, oh my God, can't believe I missed that, or this, that, and the other. But it is possible to have a beam on the top of your roof and have good results and it not be, a very high or large beam or expensive. When we talk about setting up maybe a 50-foot tower or something, maybe even larger. And here you can kind of see the dimensions of my lot. My lot line is right in between the middle of those two houses and about where this picture cuts off. You can see my driveway, and so about the end of the driveway, that's where my lot ends in the front, which is not, maybe 15 feet or so. And in the back, just beyond these trees, there's a small creek in there. My lot line ends right there. So some of that in the back's not usable. So it's a pretty small lot. So trying to get up real big antennas is not super easy, not impossible, but it's also not overly straightforward. Equipment, I start out with an ICOM 7000 and tried other rigs. I ended up with an Elecraft line type of setup in my shack. As time went, I kept adding things. I do own an amplifier, 500-watt amplifier. I don't use it that often. It usually gets put on in anger when I can't break through a pileup or they're not hearing me. The 500 watts I found was sufficient, and not necessarily the full 500, right? Maybe 200-300 watts is usually where I would set it to see if I can achieve something outside of barefoot if they're not hearing me. And it's usually when they're not hearing me, right? KX2 for portable, so that's a max of 10 watts. I do own a 9700 now since I've been doing satellite. So that's a rig specific to VHF, UHF. Great little rig for that. And I use HRD, Ham Radio Deluxe, for my logging. And not necessarily my favorite piece of software, but I've been using it since the beginning. So I'm kind of reluctant to move on to something else at the moment. Somebody else brought me on to this cloud-based logger, one of my satellite friends. So I'm kind of looking at that, maybe making a move at some point down the road. But the important thing about the logging software is that it has good award tracking, because part of what I do when I get on the radio is have my logging software tell me what I need and on what band. One important thing to do is when I go, at least in my journey, was my time on the air was very focused. So I spent my time on the air focused on what I needed. So I wasn't really spinning the dial or let's see what's going on here or there. My first kind of plan of attack was opening up, several sites that helped me determine where I need to be and when I needed to be there. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Choosing the right band. So when you think about, over time, you're trying to get multiple DXCC on different bands. You can be a little bit strategic about how you go about that. If you're, if we're in a low solar cycle, potentially low bands might be something you want to work on first. 160 meters when I started, and being in the low part of the solar cycle really didn't affect me as much, right? If I was in the HF portion. And as I entered into kind of the 160 meter season, so we can say in the Northern Hemisphere, that's going to be around November through April. And it being a nighttime band, I had to make sure that I was up for being up late. So I kind of modified my schedule while I was working on this to allow myself to be able to do that. To best be able to, be on when the activity was going to be on. You have to be open to different modes, so if you're just a phone guy or you're just a whatever mode guy, it might be time to look at different modes, especially if the award that you're looking for is not particular to a mode, right? If you're trying to achieve CW, DXCC, you're kind of stuck there. But for those that are looking for, kind of the mixed mode version of the achieving multiple bands, DXCC and multiple bands, you would definitely want to look at weak signal, friendly modes like FT8 and CW. I would say that CW is what most opened up a lot of the DX and was probably one of the major contributing factors to my success. I was learning CW. And it's why I learned CW. I didn't learn CW because I needed to, and I didn't learn CW in the beginning because I was really interested in learning CW. I kept seeing all the spots in the subband for CW, and I said, man, I got to learn this CW thing to get to the DX. And so that's what I did. That was my initial, motivation. And then I became, kind of enamored with CW, but that was my initial motivation into learning CW, and it really paid off dividends for sure. I use a lot of online sites to determine when there's openings, where people are, and if I'm targeting a particular area, like when the best time would be to work that area. Or maybe I'm seeing a particular DX entity that I need, and at the time that I'm on, perhaps is not the best time. So I do my research to say, okay, I want this DX entity that's on. When do I need to be on? When is the best time? When is the best chance that I will have on what band? And we'll talk a little bit about those. And they're probably sites that you folks have already either know about or use actively. Again, we taught, I just mentioned about FT8 and CW. And I think most of you are, familiar with band lists of different modes and the benefits of these type of modes. So I'm not going to spend too much time with that. And, I know some people, they're not really FT8 proponents, or they're, or CW. I've seen people that they don't like CW. And my only comment for mode choice is think of it as a tool, right? So your goal is to say build something. You're going to choose the right tool that's going to do it the best way and the quickest way, right? So I just kind of use modes more as a tool. Where are the people at? What's going to get me there? And I'll switch back and forth modes, if it's appropriate for the award that I'm after. Some of the tools and sites that I use a lot are listed here. So vocap for propagation prediction, DX Maps, which provides real-time mapping of QSOs, and DX Watch for spots. I have spots within HRD, but sometimes I'll monitor DX Watch as well. I guess just to fill another one of my screens that I have, but I do like DX Watch, so sometimes I'll keep an eye on DX Watch. Reverse beacon network. I may want to see how I'm getting out there, so I may call CQ and get a signal report through reverse beacon network to see, you know, if I'm reaching the area that I need to be reaching. And see, you know, if I'm not reaching the area that I'm wanting to reach, I like to see who's picking me up in reverse, you know, what skimmers are picking me up in reverse beacon network, to see, well, maybe there's an alternative area that I can work. It's like, oh, I saw a spot for this other DX entity, and it looks like that area is hearing me. So I may focus, instead of spending my time on the one that is not going to hear me, focus on the one that I have a better chance, you know, of working. So it's all a matter of being efficient and productive, right? When you're on, and using these online tools to kind of, you know, help you. It's a choice, right? You know, I know some people might not like to use sites and spots and those kinds of things. But as you saw with all the different types of awards that I've been going after, that's there's always a new challenge, right? So I'm always using different technologies to achieve a certain goal, and I just look for the next challenge, whether it be QRP version of it or targeting a specific DX area, you know. I also like to use Clublog. Clublog has a propagation tool based on actual QSOs uploaded. So it can give you by band, month, you know, where between 2 points where other people have found it most likely, you know, to be, like what time, you know, what band seems to be a good time to target a specific area. And I'll pull up some of these sites a little bit. For, you know, for antenna comparisons, I've used Whisper a lot. So to kind of do that A/B testing, so you have a couple antennas up and you're trying to understand when antenna might be best, you know, to work a sprint or to hit a particular area that day, or what have you. I'll do A/B testing and I'll use Whisper on multiple antennas, you know, if I've got another antenna strung up or whatever. FT8, the WSJTX has a built-in way to do things with FT8 and Whisper that'll give you signal reports. So that's another way to do it. And I've also in the past used, when I'm working portable, Soda Beams sells these small Whisper enabled devices that you can attach to antenna, and it kind of runs and sends Whisper signals out, and then you can go and look up on whispernet.org, you know, your hits in your signal reports, and then you can in that way kind of do comparisons. You can set up 2 antennas and 2 devices with those WhisperNet devices, and they alternate to kind of work together. One shoots off, then the other shoots off. And so you're able to do, you know, even portable, you're able to, you know, and you don't want to lug computers and things. You can use those devices to help you with portable antennas to get A/B testing results with antennas. So if that's not something you've done a lot, you know, it might be worth, it's pretty easy to do, especially if you have your shack all set up and you can set up to run Whisper through those antennas. You can quickly do some testing, you know, to see one antenna works better where. You know, sometimes one antenna works better for one thing versus the other, and vice versa. So it kind of helps you out there versus asking people for signal reports, or, you know, this kind of gives you actual data, you know, multiple data points that you can actually do a comparison based on a lot of data. I want to take a look at some of those sites that I mentioned. So if you're not familiar with VOCAP, this is the, I think this is, yeah, this is the main page to VOCAP. I tend to use the point-to-point prediction tool. And here's kind of one that I pulled up just as an example. So in this screen, I put up VK2 because I saw or heard there was a VK2 gentleman in here. So I was just curious what VOCAP would say. And I put in my grid and I selected him as received QTH, and I just set up VK2 generically.
Christian, we're not seeing vocab.
Oh, you're not seeing it? Not seeing that screen? Okay, hold on.
Yeah, I think you have to unshare the one and then bring up the other window.
Yeah. Let's see. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay. So most of you guys are probably familiar with this. If you're not, this prop wheel will tell you between two locations, and over to the right here, just moving that out of the way. You can set up mode, power, antennas, so you can play around a little bit with antenna styles, selections, power, mode. So here I have selected CW 100 watts. I left the default antennas as is just for this example. Here it tells you the bands, and here the color, the darker colors are the probability on the different bands. So VOCAP seems to like 12 meters, 15, 17 here, between 20, 21, and 23 UTC. So I was looking, the other nice thing here is you can adjust this out of the way. You can adjust the time, and gray line is one of those important things we've got to use when we're chasing DX. When we're able to capitalize on the gray line here, let's slide the time here, and we can kind of see here's like 21 UTC, so that's a gray line coming into me. So we can kind of play around with VOCAP to determine what might be, a good time to target a specific area, specific DX area. Are you guys able to see this screen, the DX maps?
Yes.
Okay, good. So DX maps is another one you guys might be familiar with. I use this a lot for 6 meters and 2 meters, and really kind of tells me localized openings. And so these lines that you're seeing in the call signs are actual QSOs that were recorded from various sources. And it can kind of give you an idea of where a particular opening, might be. So if KH6 is active, you can kind of track, he's like, oh, kind of track, that there's a particular opening to that DX entity, to that station. And so I like using this tool. You can change the different bands. There's some other neat functionality within it, but this was just something I wanted folks to take a look at if they hadn't been already familiar with it. DX Watch is the other one I was mentioning, and I'll have this open as well. Take a look at different DX spots. Take a look at signal reports, where they're hearing from. I saw DTA Shetland Islands down here, spotted quite a few times, mostly in the southern hemisphere. So this is kind of a nice tool as well. It gives you a little information about sunrise and sunsets at that particular DX as well. So sometimes I might grab that info for later. One of the other things I do, if I'm targeting a particular DX entity, maybe not a particular station, I will look at who's active or who's being spotted, and I will do skeds sometimes. I will request skeds, especially if it's something I'm hunting after. I will look for skeds, not only in my own log. So I might look at my log and say, I need Montenegro and I need it on 20 meters, or I want it on 20 meters, you know, for whatever reason. Maybe I have a station already that I got 10 meters. I may hit up that gentleman or lady, and I might hit them up and say, hey, you know, I have you my log confirmed. So I know we're able to communicate at least on 10 meters, you know, can we give 20 meters a shot? So I might tap into my own log for entities. If I don't have one, I will look at spots here, see somebody who's really active, and I may email them, go to QRZ and email them and request a sked. They won't, some people don't want to do skeds, they don't believe in them or don't have time for them, and that's fine. But that is another way to access hams in a different location to be able to make contact. It's still an exercise. Even if you set up a sked, doesn't mean you're going to make the sked. A lot of times it takes multiple tries. And that actually becomes fun in itself, because then you're using things like vocab, you know, and they're using tools and their experience about when, you know, is a good time to communicate, say, from W4 or the US to their location. So I learned a lot about, you know, when doing skeds, I learned a lot about propagation from more experienced DX operators on the other end. So it was, I didn't see it as necessarily like a cheating way of achieving the DX entity. I definitely took it as a learning experience and allowed me to kind of use tools like vocab and try, you know, if it's on different bands for the same entity or maybe on a particular band. So I was doing research on the band, particular band and band conditions, and doing research on that as well. So it's definitely a learning process. I've also looked at contest results in magazines to skim or to scout for particular DX entities that I need. If I see a big station, I might research them on QRZ and say, okay, this guy's got a big station, he's active, he's got his log on QRZ, I know he's active. Doesn't have any negative remarks about sked requests on his page. I'm gonna hit this gentleman up, and surprisingly, I've made a lot of ham friends through skeds that I've communicated and in some cases met, you know, like in Hamvention, Bert F6HK. I think I got that right. I might be missing something in there, but a gentleman from France. He's a CW Ops member, SKCC member, so I bump into him everywhere. And he's helped me with a lot of my QRP type things that I've been trying to do, like miles per watt, you know, trying to achieve a certain amount of miles per watt. So by lowering power, you can achieve a higher miles per watt for a same station, technically. And I met him, you know, at Hamvention, and I believe it was a sked, you know, through a SKCC webpage that I first made contact with Bert. So there, you know, there's something to be said about doing skeds. Part of DXCC awards is getting the confirmation. So obviously, you know, if you're on LOTW, you're going to have a much easier time. I'm sure most of you guys are on there already. Being familiar with OQRS on Club Log to be able to quickly get the QSL via OQRS for a lot of the D expeditions, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, I'm sure. And sometimes resorting to sending out the cards, right? Sometimes you need to send the cards out, and just doing that management. Once you send the cards out, just kind of keeping tracking through your logging software as to what the status is of your unconfirms, and then sometimes following up. Like I may take a evening at whatever interval and send follow-up emails after a specific interval of time, you know, that seems reasonable without hounding a DX for a card, but sometimes sending an email and following up on some of the ones that I need, you know, that are kind of left hanging to help me with the award. So I'm fairly proactive, you know what I mean? I kind of don't sit back and wait for the cards in the mail, or, you know, sit on the radio and just kind of spin around. I'm very proactive as to where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. Obviously, I'm sure all of you guys use the contest calendar. So that's one of the first things I bring up. And I see if there's a contest that's running where I can snag DX. Because they all come out of the woodwork, you know. It's like, oh, the band is dead, and then all of a sudden the contest starts, and it's like, oh my God, the propagation's great. It's like, well, there's you know 20,000 hands from all over the place on. So you know, of course you're going to hear more people. So it's very helpful to have this up to determine the activity in the exchange, because you start hearing exchanges and you're like, what the heck contest is that? You know, you just go in and you know, look at a particular contest, and usually there's a link or it'll tell you what the actual exchange is. I thought I had one up for CQ Worldwide. At any rate, I'm sure you're familiar with this contestcalendar.com. Trying to think if there's another one in here. And this is what the whisper.net.org site looks like. They have it, I have the one with the map up currently, but you can search by call and filter by band. And so this is the Whisper site that I was referring to. If you're doing antenna testing, it's kind of neat tool to use Whisper, very slow speed mode, weak signal mode, and then to be able to get signal reports is to, you know, help test antennas or see just kind of where in the world you're hitting. I think I mentioned reverse beacon network as well. So that's another one that'll give you signal reports. But these are a lot of the main, you know, sites that I use. When I'm actually on the air, I think I mentioned that I have an audio scope. So I use that a lot when I'm chasing a particular DX and they're working split. It helps me, it does help determine where everybody's at, you know, where the DX operator is listening sometimes. You know, I can kind of tell about what frequency he's listening at by looking at the activity. And so I'm always listening and trying to listen both sides and looking at the audio scope to help me out. Couple techniques, you know, you guys are probably familiar with. I'm a big CW operator, so a lot of time spent in DX chasing with CW. Tail ending, not a huge fan of that. I'm more of a fan of letting the DX operator finish talking or keying or what have you, and just being super patient and listening and waiting for a right opening. You have to be super patient, as you guys know, and waiting, because the thing about patience is most people aren't patient. So if you can outwait them a lot of times, you know, that can work. I'm not saying not to try, right? And you know, because you know, band conditions can vary, and you know, you might have one shot, right? But I found a lot of times, especially if you're like in a contest, CQ Worldwide, the guy sitting on a frequency, you've been hearing him for a while. I'll try, you know, try to find open spots when everyone else is done keying, you know, to pop in and put my call out there. Also, I may circle back. Like if there's just too much going on, I'll go chase somebody else and then come back to that station. And there's been many times where I've come back to that station and everyone else is kind of gone, and it's almost immediate where I can transmit and pick him up. So I'm gonna kind of stop talking and let you guys ask some questions, and then we can kind of move into you know, any recommendations that other folks have here. I'm sure we've got a lot of seasoned DX folks that can put their 2 cents in, you know. So I'm going to open up the floor for any questions.
Well, I'll make a comment. You mentioned don't worry about the trees, and I would echo that. I've heard far too many stations or operators say, oh, I'd love to put up an antenna, but I've got too many trees. Great. Throw some wires up in those trees with a slingshot or a bow and arrow or a pop gun or anything, and don't worry about the trees. They're your friends.
Yeah, and you know, my comment was specific to an article, you know, and I don't want to offend anyone if you're friends with the author of the article or anything, but I just want to kind of talk about that. Is the article was specifically about antennas within trees, and it was a lengthy discussion, and it won an award. You know, I think ARRL gave it an award. And the only caveat about that was I felt like the article was actually making folks not try to put antennas near trees. And it is like completely contrary, I think, to my notion of trying something. Okay,
and
so
I so disagreed with that article. I started writing a nasty letter to ARRL and decided I wouldn't send it.
Well,
but it's just not true. I mean, the story had all this facts and data, and it's baloney.
Yeah, my motto with antennas and trying things, just do it and see how it works. If I hadn't tried the 20-foot wire, which seems, it's just, I initially didn't even want to try it. I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. This is a waste of time. But the more that I talked to the ham and he showed me data, like, you know, what does VisWar charts look like? He sent me his log and the dates and everything so that I can see, you know what I mean? It wasn't just chit chat. And same setup, you know, it was ground mounted, same antenna. So like it gave me the, you know, it gave me that extra just to try it. I'm going to try this. I got nothing to lose. I'm going to try. It's not a difficult setup. And made the difference between not being able to work a lot of 160 meter DX and, you know, being able to work just about anything that was out there. So, you know, my recommendation is to always try, you know.
I would also back that up. I think Lloyd and Bob know all of my antennas are in trees, and I think I don't do too bad on DX, so give it a try.
Yeah, you know, and before that, I was loading up, this is an interesting fact, before setting up the inverted L using the Hustler, which when I did 160 meters, because I was going through the 80 meter resonator, did not allow me to use 80 meters. So I was solely focused on 160 meters. I already had 80 meters DX, so I forewent during November through April, I forewent 80 meter activity to solely focus on 160 meters, but it was a sacrifice that, you know, I took, given my objective. But you know, compromise situations, whether it's wire antennas, you know, that situation for me seemed to work better than having the wire antenna at a low level for a low height for 160 meters. I wouldn't get that much DX with the height that I was able to put my 160 meter dipole. in a V fashion. The takeoff angle just wasn't enough for that setup that I had, and the existing vertical that I had, that wire made all the difference. And again, I centered it around FT8 and used CW, so the modes also helped. It wasn't just the antenna, it was the weak signal modes that I used for that. Receive antennas for low bands are, I always recommend trying it. You know, I tried one. What most helped me was the mode choice that I had. Listening to voice on 160 meters was fairly excruciating on the vertical. So there was definitely a lot of noise, but FT8 and obviously FT8, you don't have to hear anything, you just turn the volume down on your computer. And also CW, you know, with the small bandwidth filters, small filters placed, you're not hearing most of the loud static, you know, and just good modes in general. But always experiment with antennas, always give it a shot. I've shown a lot of different sites and tools. Is there any other tools you guys are partial to or use?
Can I make a comment, Chris?
Sure.
You'd mentioned the basic clusters, and I use two, and I do it for a specific reason. I use DX Summit.
Yeah, I use that one too.
Most of the spots come from the European side. I use VE7 Charlie Charlie, and I specifically say I only want North American contacts. Right. And what that does, that allows me to watch the gray line coming across where a European sees it within this, a couple of hours. I'm going to see it. And it's helped me many times to work a station that otherwise I probably wouldn't have gotten.
Right. And so that's an interesting point. You know, I've done exactly the same thing where you filter by continent or, you know, where the spot is coming from.
Right.
And you can help time when you're going to try for this person. You know, I mean, you can sit and if it's not the right time, you can sit and call and call and call, you know, and be up all day or night or whatever, and it's just not going to happen. But you can use tools like that to see, okay, I'm starting to see people are hitting this guy, you know, now they're hitting it. Now they're getting, you know, now W4, I'm seeing some states close to me, they're coming, they're starting. So I'm going to start jumping in now, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've definitely done the same thing. And, you know, that's what's really cool about technology these days.
Yeah.
Is,
well, I've got a 75 by 100 lot, so I'm probably smaller than you are, but I went up. I've got a 90-foot crank up tower in the yard, so I went up with antennas.
Yeah, and you know, you go through phases. You go through phases as to what you're focusing on and what you're trying to learn, and awards that you're after. You know. You know, at one point I was only QRP, you know, yeah. So nothing was over 5 watts or 10 watts voice sometimes. And so I was doing all these different QRP awards. And so, you know, for a segment of time, you know, that was my main focus, you know. And then your focus shifts, like, oh, I want to go after this particular award. So sometimes I would use power if I needed to. So, you know, it varies, you know, so to say like, oh, I never use, or like, I always, you know, have an amp. Yeah, but I don't use it all the time. And it depends on what I'm doing. Now that I've done satellite, my mode has changed. Most satellites done in voice. Mm-hmm. So now I'm back on voice, you know, and actually I looked at my club log. Let's see, can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, here's my breakdown. Clublog is another cool tool because they have a way to look at DX charts. I might have mentioned it, these DX charts, to see everybody that's uploading a clublog. They're taking that data and saying, you know, from this entity to this entity by month and by hour on the different bands. Where are people making the most contact? So I'm sometimes do that as a quick check. I'm like, when are other people hitting this place, you know? And sometimes I'll go in there and take a look. But I wanted to show you, because I upload my log to Club Log as well, how my mode has varied over time. You can see the first year I started was 2014. It was 100% phone. I didn't do digital, didn't do CW. I was totally focused on voice and learning about ham radio and hitting DX, and all I was doing was voice. Then in the next year, I learned about data modes and I learned CW. So all of a sudden, you know, there was like a shift. There was like this kind of split between the modes, you know, 47, 29, 22. Then in 2016, you know, 2017, 2018, where I was teaching CW, I was chasing more and more DX, was getting really good at CW, it was all about CW. Phone became, you know, 5%, 6%, 3%, you know, of my mode of choice. Data was still kind of hanging out there, but like CW was the king. Then 2019 was a year that I worked on 100 low bands DXCC. And then you can see that phone went out the window, because what I had available to me really to achieve good DX on the low bands was CW and FT8. So now you see data and CW switch, you know, that being the predominant modes. And then 20 and 21, all of a sudden phone is like, you know, the main mode. And that's because I've been working satellites, and that is where the action is. I do CW through the satellites, but not most hams don't do CW through the satellites. It's a smaller, you know, population of those operators that do CW. So it's not that I don't want to do CW, it's just I go where the action is, because that is my goal, is to get these awards in satellite.
What antennas are you using for CW?
For satellite, you mean?
Yeah, for satellite or for.
So for satellite, and I have a picture on my QRZ page. I have a M2 Leo package. So it's a 2-meter 440 combo. The 2-meter, I think, is like 5 elements or something. And they're mounted on that same rotor
as
tower. Yeah, and it's not ASL, it's only azimuth. So it's only, you know, horizontal moving. It's fixed at a 20-degree angle.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about satellites is at about that elevation, you can work about 70% of the passes. So satellites pass, they pass at different elevations. So some might be over your head, middle of the sky, some are really low to the sky, but most passes for the satellites that are out there are within that cone. You know, if you set your antennas directionally and elevation of about 20 degrees, 15, 20 degrees, you can work most passes effectively. And so that's what I've done, and I've done great.
Have you ever tried the egg beater antennas?
Yeah, I have. Somebody lent them to me, and the fixed elevation on a rotator, you know, just with the horizontal, the azimuth, has worked way better. Now, when the satellites are in a particular position, the egg beaters might favor, you know what I mean? A particular position, but for the most part, the gain that I get, the directivity and the gain that I get with those small antennas set the way that I have it work quite a bit better than the egg beaters.
I used to do a lot of it. I've got 14 element 2 and 40 elements on 40 or 70 centimeter.
Yeah, and you know, that's kind of going to be my next challenge after satellite, is going to be 2-meter weak signal, you know, maybe 440. But I'm still working on Gridmaster for AMSAT sponsors an award called Gridmaster, which is getting all the grids.
Right.
Maidenhead locator grids in the US. I'm at 362 out of the 488 already.
Very good.
in the time that I've spent. I have worked all state satellite and, obviously VOCC satellite. So that's been my focus. And I also like to show this because it shows an evolution, right? You work on different things. And just because I love CW doesn't mean I'm always going to work CW, and I'm sure at some point I'll flip back to CW, when I get the chance, as my main mode. But that's the cool thing about the hobby. You can, if you want to focus on different things, you can. Anyone have any other comments or DX tips they want to share? Websites or operating tips?
Christian, do you at WA9GQK, do you subscribe to any of the newsletters? Because I a lot of times have gotten good heads up and predictions just by some of the tips in there, and have managed to pick up some nice contacts that way. And I wonder if you follow any of the newsletters.
Yeah, honestly, the only newsletter, because I'm online plugged into all these spotting networks and DX Watch and telling me who's going to be on and who's on. I do subscribe. ARRL puts out a couple of newsletters, one on propagation and one on, and actually I'm trying to think if it's the same newsletter, but both what DX expeditions are coming up and general propagation reports. So I'll get those for sure. So I'm always, kind of looking. I try to, I don't focus on one tool. As you can see, I set up all kinds of tools. But those are always helpful to pick up who's going to be maybe out there when. And one thing that I use that's old school is a board, a little erasable pen board in my shack, and I will write if I know if I have a sched or if there's a certain DX expedition coming in between a certain dates, and I know I want to remember to try to look for them. You know what I mean? I'll write those down. I'll write those out. If I hear a station that's a DX station, and maybe I try them and I can't get them, I'll write down the call and the time that I heard them. And then so I'll do a little tracking. So sometimes I might find that I hear that person 3 days in a row around the same time. I know that dude's, and if it's Europe or wherever, I'm like looking at the time, like, okay, this guy likes to transmit after he eats dinner, probably during the week, or whatever, during the weekend. And I'll just make these kinds of notes. So I'm always like, there's always something on there, about a station or something, somebody I'm chasing. So kind of learning those habits, just collecting data, right? It's all data. And index cards. I've got a little holder up in front of my thing, and I'll write index cards with DX stations and the time and band that I heard them, maybe a frequency to see where they're hanging out. Because people are creatures of habit. And, so let's talk about CW. People like look for a particular frequency. They'll always kind of look for that same sliver, right? To hang out at. So just, it doesn't seem, it seems kind of trivial at the moment, but taking those notes down sometimes are helpful. Maybe even if it's just information I might send to the guy because I want to sched, and I'll say, hey, I heard you in this band at this time, with this signal strength, maybe ask for a sched or strike up a conversation or something. It's those little details sometimes that help you track when maybe somebody might be on, or maybe make a connection with the guy, so something else I do as well. Is there a particular newsletters, Ed, that you like to use, that you guys are fond of?
Well,
The Daily DX.
Daily DX, yep.
Yeah, I got into Daily DX a while back and find pretty reliable information in there, and a lot of other tips on maybe not just DXing, but some of the special event things that are maybe have a little more notoriety or widespread interest. A lot of good stuff in there. And like I say, it's put me on to a couple of times where I followed what was just listed there. And again, being specific and focused on my time, I said, okay, he says this one's been showing up here. I'd make a point of getting down there, and doggone if he wasn't, the DX wasn't right there. And I had propagation for a change.
Right, and it's those little details, you know, it's when what you picked up from the newsletter, what someone else. So I have my local ham here. Here's something I also do from my local club. I'm sure you guys do this as well. I've got several guys where we're each other's newsletter.
Yeah.
So I will routinely get a call if there's a 12-meter opening or there's a particular DX station. I may be getting calls from my ham friends letting me know, you know, or a text notification from my friends, and I do the same, you know. So we have our own little cluster network, social network going on that we do. You know, for satellite, satellite community is fairly unique. There's these guys called rovers, you know, just like in the HF world and VHF world. They go to activate these grids, and we get on a AMSAT DMR net on DMR, and each person will at part of the net, we talk about like who's going to what grid, who's roving, you know. And so we're, you know, everybody's taking notes and figuring out when somebody's going to be on to pick up that grid, which is, it's just kind of like the same thing with like the DX. So it's always trying to find something new, you know, some other input that you can to give you that edge, right? Anybody else have any other tools or have any other questions or comments?
Can I make one more comment for you, Steve?
Sure.
Or Chris? Something you'd mentioned, keeping track of whether you needed the DX station or whether you had previously worked it. I can have a list that I come up and I mark off the DX entity. I see what I've worked, I mark it off, and as I do it, I put a dot. When I've submitted it to up to Logbook of the World, I put a slash through it. When I receive theirs, I put the slash the other direction. So that lets me know where in the chain the DX contact for the band and mode. I've got the 3 modes, CW, sideband, and digital. I don't care what digital mode it is, as long as it's one of the 3. And so I just start just made this form and go in, and it makes it easy to keep track of. If I see them up somewhere, do I need it? There's no need for me to call them if I don't need it.
Right.
And
exactly.
that gives somebody else an opportunity to work it. So that's just worked extremely well for me keeping up with it.
Yeah, and that's I've utilized this type of tracking every day. You know, like every time I get on and I'm chasing DX. Ham Radio Deluxe, when you open up the window of your spots, it has columns for whether you've worked the band, if you've confirmed it, or it's still unconfirmed, what the DX entity is. And it uses a green check mark, yellow check mark, red X for the different stages of what you're referring to. And so I used to use that a lot. As you start getting more and more DX, you know, unless you're chasing them on a particular band, you know, it starts getting hard to track, you know. But if we're talking about strictly new DX, you know, whatever band, then by the point where you've done a lot of DX, you already kind of know who you have and who you don't, you know, most of the time. But like band tracking, you know, that gets a little bit harder because, you know.
Yeah, well, that's why I did that, because I have 10 through 160 marked out.
Right. Yeah, and HRD will also.
Let me see if I can.
Word section. Yeah, exactly. And so you've got your system. So yeah, that's the whole point, is you develop a system to facilitate making your time on the air productive, right?
Yep.
And so if that's kind of a different operating style than how you operate now, these might be things that you want to look at to help you laser focus in and become, more productive when you're on the radio. But teach their own. Some people just like going on the air and seeing what they that's the fun of it for them, not getting all super technical and using all these tools. And some people just like to go on and seeing what's on, and that's cool too. For me, I'm very laser focused at achieving that DX and award or whatever. So I'm always looking at different tools to try to give me that edge.
Yeah, well, if you're doing the challenge, that really comes in handy.
Right. So I am. So I'm at 953 or something, I think. So I'm getting closer and closer. When you start, exactly, when you get closer, when those margins start closing in, and when you start getting closer and closer, man, you start saying, man, I don't want to waste my time on stuff I don't need. I need this. Tell me that, I need that. Tell me that little part that I need. And that's what I want to chase. I don't want to chase anything else around. I want to chase Poland. I want, what I mean? Croatia. I got 9,000 of those. Right. So, that's definitely helpful when you can use your software to laser focus like what you need.
Yeah, my challenge is 2022 as of today.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. One of the things I've done with the awards is I started looking at different DX areas, geographical areas. That's why I went after this All Africa award, ARRL award, Worked All Pacific that the New Zealand sponsored. It was always a new challenge in understanding how to do DX maybe for a geographical region. So I learned a lot in those different awards. You're targeting a certain area. So you're learning about the bands, you're learning about hitting that particular area, right? And so that's where you start making contacts with hams that are in that area or work that area, so it's fun to do. It's another way at looking at DX awards, not just the standard ARRL awards, but like awards that other radio leads sponsor that you can apply for, work on, that really make you a better DXer overall, and so that's why I did those, because I found them really challenging. Some of the words are actually really nice looking. Some of them, they're generic kind of print offs, but others, they have an emblem or graphics on them. So it's really fun to chase those kinds of awards as well. Any other questions? Comments? I don't know. Has anyone done the Worked All Europe award? That's the Deutsche Amateur Radio Club or whatever. Yeah, I think it's club.
I haven't submitted. I've got I've worked them. I've got 330 confirmed already.
Yeah, so that award, there's different levels, like 3, 2, 1, something like that. So I've got the highest level. And what was interesting in that one is initially when you go in for an award like that, you're like, well, shoot, I probably got that 3 times over or whatever. I have so much Europe in my log like everyone else. But there's a couple ways that they apply the word. It's done by band points. Mm-hmm. And essentially to get to say like 200 band points, you essentially need most countries on at least a couple bands, right? And unless you're doing heavy 80 meters, which those are like worth 2 points or something, 2 band points. So then it became a strategy of saying, okay, I have this entity, but I need it on this band, so I can get the band point for, Worked All Europe, to get the highest level award there. And so for a little while, I played that game of like finding, even though it wasn't a really a hard entity to get, I just didn't have it on that band. And it's like, I'm going to go chase, this is an easier one probably. I'm going to go chase it to pick up the band points so I can get the points to achieve the award. So that was a fun one and a little bit harder than I thought it would be initially, because you essentially have to get a lot of these European countries on multiple bands. So that was a fun one. If you haven't seen that award, that might be one to check your logs on and see how far you're off, on one of those. That might be a fun DX award to try for.
Yeah, I'll have to check it.
Chris, I'm going to stop the recording. I don't want people to stop talking, but at some point, I think I run out of recording space. So let me just stop it.
Gotcha.
And let me just say beforehand, this has been fascinating. There's a lot of really good information. I'm glad you provided the slides and the PDF so that people can check on all of your references. So let me just stop this.